Hello and welcome dear students. Today we are going to discuss an important topic, that is conservation of grassland ecosystems. The whole lecture is framed with an aim to cover the objectives of grasslands and their importance, stock of grassland ecosystems, global extent of grasslands and bottom lines, specific threats to grasslands, conservation strategies for grasslands, and management of grassland habitats. Now, let us first discuss grasslands and their importance. The goods and services provided by the world's grasslands have received far less attention than those supplied by, for example, tropical forests and coral reefs. Although grasslands are arguably more important to a larger percentage of people, grasslands are home to 938 million people, about 17% of the world's population. They are found throughout the world, in human as well as the arid zones. But grasslands are particularly important features of the world's drylands. The researchers have defined grassland ecosystems as areas dominated by grassy vegetation and maintained by fire, grazing and drought or freezing temperatures. Using this broad definition, grasslands encompass non-woody grasslands, savannas, woodlands, shrublands and tundra. Grassland ecosystems are found on every continent. Among the most extensive are the savannas. Grassland ecosystem is known by different names across the globe. For example, steppes in Europe and Asia, veldt in South Africa, pampas in South America, downs in Australia, etc. The climatic conditions of different grasslands vary to some extent, depending on their locations. Grassland ecosystem plays an important role in the animal kingdom. Various species of animals starting from herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, insects, etc. live together in grasslands, making it a rich ecosystem in terms of the food chains. Grassland ecosystems have historically been crucial to the human food supply. The ancestors of nearly all the major cereal crops originally developed in grasslands, including wheat, rice, rye, barley, sorghum and millet. Agroecosystems have replaced many grasslands, but grasslands still provide genetic resources for improving food crops and are a potential sources of pharmaceuticals and industrial products. Grasslands are important habitats for many species, including breeding, migratory and wintering birds, and support many wild and domestic grazing animals. Grassland vegetation and soils also store a considerable quantity of carbon. Other grassland ecosystem goods and services include meat and milk, wool and leather products, energy from fuel wood and wind generated from wind farms, cultural and recreational services such as tourism, hunting, aesthetic, spiritual gratification, water regulation and purification. Now, discussing the stock of grassland ecosystems, the main highlights are grasslands, which cover 40% of the Earth's surface, are home to almost a billion people, half of them living on susceptible dry lands. Agriculture and urbanization are transforming grasslands. For some North American prairies, conversion is already nearly 100%. Road building and human-induced fires also are changing the extent, composition and structure of grasslands. All of the major food grains, corn, wheat, oats, rice, barley, millet, rye and sorghum originate in grasslands. Wild strains of grasses can provide genetic material to improve food crops and to help keep cultivated varieties resistant to diseases. Grasslands attract tourists willing to travel long distances and pay safari fees to hunt and view grassland fauna. Grasslands boast some of the world's greatest natural phenomena. Major migratory treks of large herds of wild beasts in Africa, caribou in North America and Tibetan antelope in Asia. Now, the conditions and changing capacity. Many grasslands today support high livestock densities and substantial meat production, but soil degradation is a mounting problem. Soil data show that 20% of the world's susceptible drylands, where many grasslands are located, are degraded. Overall, the ability of grasslands to support livestock production over the long term appears to be declining. Areas of greatest concern are in Africa, where livestock densities are high and some countries already show decrease in meat production. Now, the global extent of grasslands and bottomlines. Grasslands are found on every continent and cover approximately 41% of Earth's land area, excluding Greenland and Antarctica. To gauge the impact of human activity on the extent of grasslands, researchers looked at 5 regions that could be expected to be entirely grasslands based on current climatic and geographic conditions. Of these, the tall grass prairie in North America shows the greatest change, with grasslands now accounting for only 9.4% of the total area. Only 21% of grasslands remains in South America. By contrast, more than 50% of the regions selected in Asia, Africa and Australia remain as grasslands. Let us take an assessment of the goods and services supplied by grasslands. The main is food production. Grasslands are central to world food production. Historically, grasslands have been the ecosystem most extensively transformed to agriculture. They are the original source of many food crops and a continuing source of genetic material to improve modern crops. But grasslands are also major suppliers of food and income in the form of meat production from livestock. This is particularly important for rural populations. For example, in Africa, where rural populations are substantial, grasslands often support high livestock densities, that is, the number of livestock raised per hectare, and are responsible for most of the continent's beef production. The bottom line of food production involves that worldwide production of beef, mutton and goat meat has never been higher. However, this reflects more the intensification of meat production into feedlots than an increase in grasslands' ability to support livestock. In fact, data on soil degradation in the world's susceptible drylands suggests that the capacity of grasslands to continue to support livestock production over the long term appears to be declining in many areas, with 20% of the world's susceptible drylands being degraded. Now, let us discuss biodiversity. As in other ecosystems, grassland biodiversity supplies direct goods, game species, medicinal plants, tourism and genetic material for breeding purposes, to name a few, and is also a critical factor underlying the capacity of grasslands to provide other goods and services. Many grasslands contain a rich assemblage of species, often species found in no other ecosystems. For example, researchers found that 19% of the world's recognized centers of plant diversity, that is, the regions that contain large numbers of species, especially species found in only limited areas, are located in grasslands. Similarly, grassland areas contain 11% of the world's endemic bird areas, that is, the areas encompassing the ranges of 2 or more species that have relatively small breeding ranges. Now, the bottom line of biodiversity is direct measurements of biodiversity condition in grasslands are sparse. However, where information is available, it shows that serious problems of species introductions are common and that populations of many native species are dropping. This suggests that at least regionally the capacity of grasslands to support biodiversity is decreasing. Indeed, the extensive conversion of grasslands to agriculture and urban areas and the growing degree of fragmentation suggest that many grassland ecosystems may already be unable to provide goods and services related to biodiversity. And of the many areas that have been identified as still containing outstanding grassland biodiversity, few are monitored or protected by legislation or maintenance programs. Now, let us discuss the carbon storage. How the world's grasslands are managed will have a significant influence on atmospheric carbon concentrations. Researchers calculated that the soil and vegetation in grasslands worldwide currently store about 33% of the total carbon stored in terrestrial ecosystems. The amount of carbon stored in grasslands is about half the amount stored in forestry ecosystems. Even though the total area of grasslands is nearly twice as large, a variety of human activities can disturb the carbon storage capacity of grasslands. When grasslands are converted to croplands, the removal of vegetation and subsequent cultivation reduces surface cover and destabilizes soil, leading to the release of organic carbon. Degradation of grass cover in drylands can also be a significant source of carbon loss in grasslands, as can the widespread practice of burning grasslands to improve their pasture value. Even the growing threat of invasive species in grasslands may bode ill for carbon storage. Now, the Bottom line for carbon storage is, although they store less carbon than world forests, grasslands do store approximately 33% of all carbon stored in terrestrial ecosystems, more in the soil. Thus, the potential for soil degradation to decrease carbon storage in grasslands is significant. Current practices of grassland conversion and degradation of dry grassland areas are reducing the carbon storage potential in many regions of the world, especially the arid zones. Now, the tourism. Grasslands provide important cultural, aesthetic and recreational services. Many grasslands serve as choice for hiking, hunting and fishing areas, while other grasslands are sites of historical importance, religious and ceremonial activities. The economic contribution of the recreational services provided by grasslands can be significant. In some countries such as Kenya, grasslands and their wildlife are clearly the most popular tourist destination. The bottom line for tourism is growth in tourist numbers and tourism receipts in grasslands rich countries speaks to the significant economic contribution of grasslands tourism. But it is difficult to evaluate the present quality and long-term prognosis for grasslands tourism because of the lack of consistent, comprehensive data on wildlife exploitation, tourist impacts and the size and quality of trophy animals, among other indicators. The continued conversion of grasslands to agriculture and urban areas increased fire frequency. The spread of invasive species and the impacts of tourism itself suggest a potential decline in the capacity of grasslands to maintain tourism and recreational services over the long term. Now, let us discuss some of the specific threats to grasslands. Main threat, that is poor agricultural practices, can ruin soil and strip grasslands of life. If crops are not rotated properly, the soil can become infertile and nothing can be grown for several years. Monocropping or growing only one crop at a time, like corn, is an agricultural practice that depletes the soil's nutrients. Further, because grasslands thrive off biodiversity of plants and animals, monocropping that provides only a single type of plant tends to weaken the biome and increases vulnerability to natural disasters. Toxic pesticides used in agricultural croplands can be deadly for wild flora and fauna. Grazing livestock can consume, trample and destroy grasses. Selective grazing can reduce the competitive nature of the entire ecosystem by weeding out some plants and allowing others to overpopulate. Additionally, conventional agricultural croplands often provide few food sources and nesting areas for birds. The continued global warming could turn current marginal grasslands into deserts as rainfall patterns change. Development of urban areas is increasingly cutting into grassland habitat. Now, discussing the invasive species can displace native plants and reduce the quality of a grassland. Invasive plants may not be equipped to handle extreme weather like droughts and wildfires, thus resulting in further habitat loss. Now the solutions to grassland problems. Continue education efforts, particularly among farmers, on how to protect the soil and prevent soil erosion. Protect and restore wetlands, which are an important part of grassland ecology. Rotate agricultural crops to prevent the sapping of nutrients. Plant trees and windbreaks to reduce erosion on farm fields. Conduct controlled dry season burning to stimulate fresh plant growth and to restore calcium to the soil that builds up in the dry grasses. Some species of native plants need occasional fire to thrive, while blazes can also help remove invasive species. Now the conservation strategies for grasslands. All types of natural grasslands, including prairies, savannas, barrens, glacis, outcrops, rivers, belts, bogs, fens, and other herbaceous wetlands are considered high priority conservation targets. Priority will be placed on: number 1, protection of high quality remnant grasslands that support rare species and communities. Number 2, restoration of degraded grasslands that support or have the potential to support rare species and communities. And number 3, recreation of grassland habitats in areas that were historically grasslands but have succeeded to forests or been converted to agricultural landscapes. The other conservation strategies involve preservation, that is, we will work to preserve our precious few ancient old growth grassland remnants through acquisition and easements. And then restoration, we have the potential to restore grasslands on a large scale by thinning forests in areas that were historically open. And recreation, we want to recreate lost ecosystems at a large and meaningful scale by using seed from existing remnants to put nearly extinct grasslands back on the landscape. Then rescue. Grasslands dependent biodiversity is imminently threatened at hundreds of sites. We need the capability to mobilize quickly to salvage and rescue species and communities. And research is a race against time. Whole grassland systems are disappearing before we've had a chance to understand them. Remnants urgently need basic biodiversity research. Then seed banking. We must plan for the future by ensuring we have the right seed in the right place at the right time. Precious remnants are the genetic storehouses of locally adapted seed and source populations of other organisms that will serve as building blocks for restoration. And education. We can't protect what we don't understand. There is a critical need for the development of education and outreach resources with a special focus on engaging a public that is increasingly removed from nature. We need citizen science, volunteer programs, technological tools, publications, videos, documentaries, mobile apps, online materials, and/or curricula that have the potential to enhance public understanding of grasslands. And the market. When economic incentives align with ecological needs, a truly sustainable system can be created. Now, how can we manage, or we can say management of the grassland habitats, which can be done by Habitat structure. Some grassland bird species prefer short vegetation heights, whereas others prefer intermediate to tall vegetation heights at the start of the breeding season. Proper plant selection, prescribed fire, selective mowing, and grazing can shape a vegetation structure to benefit wildlife. Burn. Fire is an important natural disturbance in grassland ecosystems, and most prairie plants thrive with prescribed burns. Fire is an important tool, but it should be used with caution. Try not to burn more than half of a site in one season. Fire might have a detrimental effect on local wildlife populations. Mow. Mowing can be an important management tool to control invasive and woody plant species, especially when fire can't be used. But mowing grassland habitat during the summer destroys habitat structure and bird nesters. Then graze. Grazing of livestock like cows can be compatible with conservation of grassland habitat. But if a pasture is overstocked and hence overgrazed, it won't provide habitat structure and will promote damage such as soil erosion. Techniques such as patch burn grazing are promising as grassland management tools to vary plant structure and promote botanical diversity. Keep out invasive species. Many grassland sites are dominated by non-native plant species, but some plants are worse than others. Then limit woody plants. Shrubs and trees can change the structure of grassland habitat. Some birds need patches of shrubs to nest successfully, but most grassland birds don't. Manage appropriately to limit woody plants. Then human engagement. Grasslands provide educational and recreational opportunities for people. Activities such as bird watching, hiking, nature study, scientific research, and game hunting can and should be compatible with grassland conservation. This was all about today's topic. Hope you have enjoyed it well. Thank you for watching.